Mean People Fail is a blog from Pogram, the founder of Y Combinator. The first time I read this blog, I brushed it off because the title or the argument through this blog weren't very interesting to me. It wasn't until yesterday I asked myself, what does interesting mean to me? And my honest answer was novelty, rarity, counterintuitive, and controversial. It's not about logical soundness or even utilitarian usefulness. It's about conflict, tension, and energy. My brain is naturally drawn to those things. Things like Purple Call. I'm sorry, I forgot to explain the reference here. So, Purple Call is a book from Seth Godin, where he explains how advertising draws people's attention. And Seth Godin is a very influential figure in marketing. Bye. Of course, I would ask how a purple call can exist. How could I not ask a question and being hooked? Then I remembered that's exactly how social media exploits us. And I don't like that. I don't want to support the exploitation of social media. But I was acting just as a typical victim in the online world. So that's the first reason I want to read this paper again, because I want to go against myself. There are two more reasons. The first one is simple because I like the title. I want the title to be true. I want mean people to fail, and more importantly, the good people to succeed. Therefore, I want to dig deeper to see if I can learn something concrete to promote the idea that I already believe. The second point is a bit harder to describe, but I'll try. It's about the rebelliousness in the form of letting out impulses. Like when we were young, we pour our energy into things without calculating the ROI. We make choices not because we think the reward can justify the efforts. It's most of the time quite the opposite. We do things because we didn't even use thinking. And that's the power of impulses. So a lot of time we need this level of blindness to set the momentum, even to make very important decisions in life. Because of that, I indulge myself in some non-testable beliefs until I'm totally defeated. To choose a definition to live by, it takes stupidity as well as courage. And my belief is I want to be a gourmet for ideas. What do I mean by that? So for most people, when they eat, it's usually because they are hungry or they feel stressed out, or it's just a habit. It's time to eat. But when a gourmet eat, they will dissect every molecule in the food and they will retrieve every idea behind it. Because the value is not in the subject in the food, the value is from the gourmet, their processing, how much they can extract the information from this subject. And I want to be someone like that. At least for the teeny tiny part of whole reality I can possibly touch upon. And I want to break the stereotype of garbage in, garbage out, because it should be garbage in and diamond out, because that is the power of technology and thinking. Claiming an idea uninteresting, like what I did to this blog, even this judgment only exists in my own mind, and I never told the author of this blog, it will still cost me because it inflates the complacency of my ability to explore, which eventually will lead into a boring life. It will make it harder to be excited. Whenever I claim something good or bad, right or wrong, it always holds more weight than I already processed, but I just don't have the bandwidth for it. However, I can't just stop communicating for the sake of not being misunderstood. So this causes a conundrum. I want to judge, but I don't want to be wrong. And the only hope I see there is to go dig deeper. When I judge, when I blame, at least I'm attacking something concrete. It won't end up nowhere. And in that process, hopefully, I can turn this idea, right or wrong, a binary value, into a spectrum, a numerical value. I can't be fully correct, but I can be less wrong. Therefore, I have to do the work to read the blog again to make sure I took my time processing it. In today's video, I will read this blog first and then share my thoughts about it. Mean People Fail by Paul Graham, November 2014. It struck me recently how few of most successful people I know are mean. There are exceptions, but remarkably few. Meanness isn't rare. In fact, one of the things that internet has shown us is how mean people can be. A few decades ago, only famous people and professional writers got to publish their opinions. Now everyone can, and we can all see the long tail of meanness that had previously been hidden. And yet, while there are clearly a lot of mean people out there are next to none among the most successful people I know. What's going on here? Are meanness and success inversely correlated? Part of what's going on, of course, is selection bias. I only know people who work in certain fields: startup founders, programmers, and professors. I'm willing to believe that successful people in other fields are mean. Maybe successful hedge fund managers are mean. I don't know enough to say. It seems quite likely that most successful drug lords are mean. But there are at least a big chunk of the world that mean people don't rule. And that territory seems to be growing. My wife and Y Combinator co-founder Jessica is one of those rare people who have X-ray vision for character. Being married to her is like standing next to an airport baggage scanner. She came to startup world from investment banking, and she has always been struck by how consistently successful startup founders turn out to be good people, and how consistently bad people fail as stand-up founders. Why? I think there are several reasons. One is that being mean makes you stupid. That's why I hate fights. You never do your best work in a fight, because fights are not sufficiently general. Winning is always a function of the situation and the people involved. You don't win fights by thinking of big ideas, but by thinking of tricks that work in one particular case. And yet, fighting is just as much work as thinking about real problems, which is particularly painful to someone who cares how their brain is used. Your brain goes fast, but you get nowhere, like a car spinning its wheel. Startups don't win by attacking. They win by transcending. There are exceptions, of course, but usually the way to win is to race ahead, not to stop and fight. Another reason mean founders lose is that they can't get the best people to work for them. They can hire people who will put up with them because they need a job, but the best people have other options. A mean person can't convince the best people to work for him unless he is super convincing. And while having the best people helps any organization, it's critical for startups. There is also a complementary force at work. If you want to build great things, it helps to be driven by a spirit of benevolence. The startup founders who end up richest are not the ones driven by money. The ones driven by money take the big acquisition offer that nearly every successful startup gets en route. The ones who keep going are driven by something else. They may not say so explicitly, but they are usually trying to improve the world, which means people with a desire to improve the world have a natural advantage. The exciting thing is that Startups are not just a one random type of work in which meanness and success are inversely correlated. This kind of work is the future. For most of history, success meant control of scarce resources. One got that by fighting, whether literally in the case of pastoral nomads driving hunter-gatherers into marginal lands, or metaphorically in the case of Gilded Age financiers contending with one another to assemble railroad monopolies. For most of history, success meant success at zero-sum games, and in most of them, meanness was not a handicap, but probably an advantage. That is changing. Increasingly, the games that matter are not zero-sum. Increasingly, you win not by fighting to get control of a scarce resource, but by having new ideas and building new things. There have long been games where you won by having new ideas. In the 3rd century BC, Archimedes won by doing that, at least until an invading army killed him, which illustrates why this change is happening. For new ideas to matter, you need a certain degree of civil order, and not just not being at war. You also need to prevent the sort of economic violence that 19th century magnates practiced against one another and communist countries practiced against their citizens. People need to feel that what they create can't be stolen. That has always been the case for thinkers, which is why this trend began with them. When you think of successful people from history who are not ruthless, you get mathematicians and writers and artists. The exciting thing is that their MO seems to be spreading. The games played by intellectuals are leaking into the real world, and this is reversing the historical polarity of the relationship between meanness and success. So, what do I think of this blog? Paul Graham proposed a hierarchy of disagreement, and he observed that if moving up the disagreement hierarchy makes people less mean, that will make most of them happier. I disagreed with this paper the whole time, until the last minute, because I thought meanness and success are orthogonal, because there are examples for all the 4 combinations of meanness and success. However, I shouldn't have treated a social pattern as math in the first place. Only because there are contradictory examples doesn't mean the generalization isn't solid. I can't use the high dimension and unpredictability of human behaviors to negate all social pattern generalization blindly. That's just lazy. So, I agree with this blog. Although he never defined what is meanness, and I can find many counterexamples, I still agree with it as a general pattern, because I also believe in this. If people do have a choice, of course they will choose to be good people. Now the problem is, I can't apply that disagreement hierarchy I just learned anymore. And I don't know why I spent 30 hours producing this video on a view I don't disagree. I regret it now.